The little town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. People greeted strangers with smiles. Children rode their bicycles without fear. Every autumn, golden leaves covered the streets like a soft blanket, and every Saturday morning, the old church bells echoed across town. At the center of Willow Creek stood a building older than almost everyone who lived there. The Maple Street Public Library. It wasn't the biggest library in America. It wasn't the most famous. But to the people of Willow Creek, it was the heart of the town. And inside that library worked 72-year-old Eleanor Brooks. Everyone loved Eleanor. She remembered every child's favorite book. She knew every elderly visitor by name. If someone looked sad, she somehow noticed before they spoke a single word. People often joke that Eleanor could read hearts better than books. Every morning, she arrived before sunrise. She unlocked the heavy wooden doors, turned on the warm yellow lamps, watered the flowers near the windows, straightened every chair. Then, just before opening the library, she always walked toward a quiet corner beside the largest window. There stood a small oak table with 2 chairs. One chair was always perfectly tucked under the table. The other remained slightly pulled back. Eleanor gently placed a small white card on that chair. Reserved. She smiled, almost as if she expected someone to arrive at any moment. The strange ritual had continued for 20 years. No holidays. No vacations. No exceptions. The chair remained empty. The younger librarians never understood. One afternoon, Sarah, who had worked there for only 6 months, finally gathered the courage to ask, "Miss Eleanor, may I ask you something?" Eleanor smiled while arranging a stack of novels. "Of course, dear. Why do you reserve that chair every single day?" "For 20 years. I've never seen anyone sit there." Eleanor paused. Her fingers rested gently on the cover of an old book. Then she looked toward the empty chair. "Because one day, the right person will need it." Sarah laughed softly. "You really believe that?" "I don't believe it," Eleanor answered quietly. "I know it." Sarah smiled politely. She assumed the old woman simply enjoyed mysteries. The conversation ended, but Eleanor's eyes lingered on the empty chair long after Sarah had walked away. Across town, another morning began very differently. Daniel Harper woke before dawn. Not because he wanted to, because sleep no longer stayed with him. The apartment was silent except for the ticking of an old wall clock. The tiny kitchen sink still held yesterday's coffee cup. Bills covered the dining table. A faded military jacket hung near the front door. Daniel stared at the ceiling. Another nightmare. Another morning. Another day pretending everything was fine. 25 years earlier, Daniel had returned home as a decorated Army veteran. The town welcomed him with applause. Flags. Parades. Handshakes. But none of them could erase what he had seen overseas. Some memories refused to stay buried. The loud explosions. The smoke. The screams. Most of all, his best friend Michael. The young soldier who had died in Daniel's arms after whispering only 4 words. "Go home for me." Daniel had never forgotten them. He never would. His wife tried to help. For years. She begged him to see therapists, to join support groups, to speak. Instead, Daniel buried himself inside silence. Eventually, silence destroyed their marriage. His daughter Emily was only 12 when they divorced. Now she was 32. He hadn't heard her voice in almost 8 years. Not because he didn't try. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Father's Day, he mailed another letter. None were answered. Still, he never stopped writing. At exactly 9:30 that same morning, Daniel left his apartment carrying nothing except an old backpack. He had no destination. Walking kept his mind busy. He passed the bakery. Children laughed outside the ice cream shop. A young couple held hands while crossing the street. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere. Daniel felt invisible. As light rain began to fall, he searched for somewhere dry. His eyes landed on a wooden sign. Maple Street Public Library. He hesitated. He couldn't remember the last time he had entered a library. Maybe 20 years. Maybe longer. Still, something about the warm lights inside pulled him forward. He slowly opened the door. A tiny silver bell rang above his head. Sarah looked up. "Good morning." Daniel nodded awkwardly. "I'm just getting out of the rain." "You're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. No membership required today." For the first time in weeks, someone smiled at him without expecting anything. He quietly wandered between the bookshelves. Old history books, travel guides, poetry, biographies. The peaceful silence wrapped around him like a warm blanket. His breathing slowed. Then, something unusual caught his attention. Near the garden window, one chair carried a small white card. Reserved. Every other chair was occupied. Only that one remained empty. Daniel frowned. He glanced around. No one seemed to be coming. Curiosity finally pushed him toward the elderly librarian arranging books nearby. "I'm sorry to bother you." Eleanor turned. Her gentle smile appeared instantly. "Yes." Daniel pointed toward the chair. "Is someone expecting to sit there?" For several seconds, Eleanor simply looked into his tired eyes. Not at his clothes. Not at his grey beard. Not at the old military jacket. She looked at the loneliness hiding behind them. Then, very slowly, she reached for the white card, folded it once, placed it carefully into her sweater pocket. She looked back at Daniel. Her voice was almost a whisper. "I've been saving this seat for 20 years." Daniel immediately stepped backward. "Oh, then I shouldn't." She interrupted softly. "I wasn't waiting for a name. I was waiting for a soul." Then she gently placed her hand on the back of the chair. "And today, I think my waiting is finally over." Daniel felt something inside him break. No one had looked at him with such kindness in years. His hands trembled. Without realizing it, tears filled his eyes. And for the first time in almost a decade, a stranger made him feel seen. Daniel remained standing beside the chair. The library around him faded into silence. He had heard thousands of words in his lifetime. Military orders, doctor's advice, therapists' questions, neighbors' greetings. But somehow, I wasn't waiting for a name. I was waiting for a soul. Those words reached a place inside him that nothing else had touched for years. Very slowly, he sat down. Neither of them spoke. Outside, gentle rain tapped against the tall windows. Inside, only the soft ticking of the antique clock could be heard. After several quiet minutes, Eleanor placed 2 cups of tea on the table. "I always make 2. Daniel looked surprised. "You expected someone." She smiled. "I hoped." Daniel wrapped both hands around the warm cup. "I don't usually talk much." "You don't have to. I've learned that silence often tells the truth long before words do." For nearly an hour, they simply sat together. No pressure. No awkward questions. No forced conversation. It felt strangely peaceful. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "My name is Daniel." "Eleanor." She extended her hand. "It's nice to finally meet you." Daniel frowned. "Finally." Eleanor smiled but didn't answer. Instead, she stood. "Come with me." She led him toward a narrow hallway hidden behind the history section. At the end stood a small wooden door marked Archives. She unlocked it. Dust floated through thin beams of sunlight. Old newspapers, photographs, letters, boxes filled every shelf. Daniel looked around curiously. "I've spent 40 years protecting the town's memories." Eleanor carefully opened one wooden cabinet. Inside were hundreds of envelopes tied with faded blue ribbons. Daniel noticed something unusual. Every envelope had a name. Some belonged to people who still lived in Willow Creek. Others belonged to people who had passed away years earlier. "What are these?" "They're stories." "I don't understand." "Whenever someone donates old family letters before moving away, I preserve them." Daniel nodded. Then Eleanor reached toward the highest shelf. She pulled down a small cedar box. Unlike the others, this one wasn't covered in dust. It looked as though someone opened it often. She placed it gently on the table. Her hands trembled slightly. "I've been waiting a very long time to show this to someone." Daniel felt his heartbeat quicken. She slowly lifted the lid. Inside rested 3 things. An old military photograph, a silver dog tag, and a sealed letter. Daniel's breathing stopped. The photograph showed 4 young soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, laughing, covered in mud. One of them was him, 26 years younger. His eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she picked up the dog tag. The engraved name caught Daniel completely off guard. Michael Carter. Daniel's hands began shaking uncontrollably. His best friend. The man who never came home. His voice cracked. How? How do you know Michael? Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, then quietly replied, "Because he was my son." The room fell completely silent. Daniel stared at her, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to move. 25 years. For 25 years he had carried the unbearable guilt of surviving while Michael didn't. Every night he replayed those final moments. Every night he heard the same words. "Go home for me." Tears rolled down Daniel's face. "I'm so sorry. I tried to save him." His voice broke into uncontrollable sobs. I couldn't. Eleanor walked around the table. Without saying a word, she gently hugged him, like a mother comforting a frightened child. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Eventually Daniel whispered, "I wanted to visit you. So many times. But I couldn't. I was ashamed. I promised him I'd bring him home. And I failed." Eleanor slowly shook her head. "No. You kept your promise." Daniel looked confused. "I didn't. You brought something even more precious. My son's final moments." She carefully opened the sealed envelope. The army delivered Michael's belongings. But this letter wasn't among them. Daniel stared at the envelope. "I've never seen it." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Because Michael never mailed it." She unfolded the yellowed paper. The military found it inside his backpack. It was addressed to me. Her voice trembled as she began reading. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, don't be sad for too long. I have the best friend anyone could ask for. His name is Daniel Harper. If anything ever happens to me, please don't let him blame himself. He carries the weight of everyone. Promise me you'll remind him that surviving isn't something to be ashamed of. Tell him he deserves to laugh again. He deserves a family. He deserves peace. And Mom, if he ever finds his way back home, please save him a seat beside you. He'll need it more than anyone else." Daniel covered his face with both hands. He cried harder than he had cried on the battlefield. Harder than at his divorce. Harder than at Michael's funeral. 25 years. 25 years of believing he had failed his best friend. And all this time, Michael's final wish had been to save him. Eleanor folded the letter carefully. Then she looked at the empty chair beside Daniel. "I wasn't saving that seat for my son. I was saving it for the man my son trusted with his last breath." Daniel looked at her through tear-filled eyes. For the first time in decades, the crushing weight on his heart felt just a little lighter. But neither of them knew. Someone else had been standing outside the archive room, listening to every single word. And that unexpected visitor was about to change both of their lives forever. The old wooden floor creaked. Daniel slowly turned toward the archive room door. Someone was standing there. For a brief moment, no one spoke. It was Sarah. The young librarian looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to listen. I heard voices and..." She lowered her eyes. "I couldn't walk away." Daniel quickly wiped away his tears. Sarah looked at Eleanor. "Miss Eleanor. All these years. That chair. It was for him." Eleanor nodded quietly. "For 20 years." Sarah covered her mouth. She had imagined dozens of stories. None of them had come close to the truth. The following morning, Daniel returned to the library. For the first time in years, he arrived somewhere because he wanted to, not because he had nowhere else to go. Eleanor smiled as soon as she saw him. "I had a feeling you'd come back." Daniel laughed softly. "So did I." Every morning became a routine. tea, books, conversation. Sometimes they spoke about history. Sometimes about Michael. Sometimes they simply watched children reading near the window. Little by little, Daniel smiled more often. The nightmares became less frequent. The silence inside his apartment no longer felt unbearable. One afternoon, Eleanor handed him a small notebook. "I have a favor to ask." "What is it?" "Would you read stories to the children every Saturday?" Daniel looked shocked. "Me? I've never even spoken in front of 5 people." "You don't need to perform. You only need to be yourself." That Saturday, only 6 children came. Daniel's hand shook while holding the book. He stumbled over the first few pages. Then a little girl raised her hand. "Mr. Daniel, you make the soldier sound brave." Daniel smiled. He was. "Was it you?" The room became quiet. Daniel hesitated. Finally, he nodded. The children clapped. Not because he was a hero, because they were happy someone was reading to them. For the first time in 25 years, Daniel felt useful again. Weeks passed. One rainy afternoon, a woman entered the library carrying a small cardboard box. She looked around nervously. Sarah greeted her. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Daniel Harper." Sarah smiled. "He's reading in the garden." The woman slowly walked outside. Daniel looked up. His heart nearly stopped. Emily. His daughter stood only a few feet away. Neither of them moved. 8 years of silence filled the space between them. Finally, Emily spoke. "I almost turned around 3 times." Daniel whispered, "I'm glad you didn't." She looked down at the old cardboard box. "I found all your letters." Daniel frowned. "My letters? When Mom passed away." "I found every birthday card. Every Christmas letter. Every Father's Day message." Her voice broke. "She never told me you kept writing." Daniel couldn't speak. "I thought you forgot me." He shook his head with tears in his eyes. "Not one single day." Emily stepped forward. "I read every letter. They made me realize I wasn't the only one hurting." Without another word, she hugged her father. Daniel held his daughter tighter than he had ever held anyone. 25 years earlier, he had lost his best friend. 8 years earlier, he had lost his daughter. Now, on a quiet rainy afternoon, life returned one precious gift. Months later, the library hosted its annual community celebration. Families filled every corner. Children laughed. Music echoed through the garden. Sarah walked onto the small stage. "I have an announcement." She smiled toward Eleanor. "For 20 years, our librarian kept one chair empty. Today, it will never be empty again." Everyone applauded. Daniel looked at Eleanor. She gently took the old white card from her pocket, the same one she had carried every day for 2 decades. She smiled. Then, slowly, she tore it into tiny pieces. The wind carried them across the garden. There is no need to reserve the seat anymore. The person it belonged to finally came home. The crowd stood in silence. Many were wiping away tears. Daniel looked toward the empty chair, then quietly sat down. This time, not as a broken soldier, not as a lonely man, but as family. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Eleanor handed Daniel one final envelope. "My son wanted you to have this." Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a faded photograph. 2 young soldiers laughing beneath a bright summer sky. On the back, Michael had written only one sentence. "If you're looking at this, it means you finally forgave yourself. Now go live the life both of us dreamed of." Daniel smiled through tears. He looked toward the sunset outside the library window. "I miss you, buddy." A gentle breeze moved through the open window. For just a moment, it almost felt like someone had whispered back, "I'm proud of you." Years later, children visiting the Maple Street Library often asked about the chair beside the window. Sarah would simply smile and say, "That chair reminds us that sometimes the people we are waiting for don't need directions. They only need someone who refuses to give up on them." And every Saturday morning, an elderly librarian, a retired veteran, and his daughter could still be found sitting together beside that same window, proving that even the deepest wounds can heal. When someone keeps a place for you, until you're finally ready to come home.